the rise of Buddhism, and this particular individual who got an enlightenment, and then there's this religion that was built around him. And his particular time, though, he had a contemporary. He had another enlightened person that was in a different philosophical discipline, and that person was in a discipline that we call Jain or Jainism. Again, they call it a religion. It's not really, but that person was also enlightened, and that person actually represented the 24th enlightened person in their chain of spiritual discipline. And if you follow that chain of spiritual discipline all the way back and read their literature, you see that at one point there were 600 billion humans on what they called the 2.5 islands of life in our solar system, Mars, Moon, and Earth. And they're saying that this existed back, X number of million years ago when we were all in this giant collective living differently. And indeed, we see that the concepts of alien wars are not unique to us. And in fact, if you were to go and say, oh, hey, we're going to be fighting aliens here in a few years, and you went and discussed it with somebody who is familiar with Hindu literature, they'd say, oh, yeah, I'm familiar with that. Well, when do we get started? Because in their literature, it was a common fact that, for centuries there were these battles going on involving spaceships and humans against various other alien entities, or extraterrestrial, however we want to think about it. And basically what it looks like is more of a return to those times rather than anything new. Make sense?
So, yeah, it makes perfect sense to me. So, in other words, what we may be seeing is an end to the rule of the little people by the elite.
Correct.
Oh, my God.
And the changes and ramifications of that are just huge. In our data, it seems to suggest that by the time we reach 2013, the concept of the monarchies, for instance, in the developed world here with, the Queen of England and Belgium and so on, and their claim to ownership will be kind of moot and gone. We have some really tough times coming, and those really tough times are going to just shred the current social infrastructure that still, to this day, is based on feudalism, where the Queen claims to own 1/6 of the planet and all the creatures on it.
Well, if you look at our elected officials, they get elected, then they pass their seat to their son or their daughter, and their son or their daughter or their widow carries on the tradition.
It's even worse than that. Yeah, as you say, we elect these officials, and what is the first thing they do? They go and trot on over and bow to the Queen and then go and kiss the Pope. It's like, okay, who's your loyalties to, dude?
I know.
I thought we had wars to get rid of these guys.
I agree completely. We have. When do you think that we abandoned the Constitution and the country our forefathers created?
I don't think we abandoned it. In my generation, it actually probably occurred in my generation that we've shifted to a different form of reality. So I would say that back in the 1940s through the 50s, with the adjunct of several key kinds of things coming along, a shadow government was created, and what we're living in right now is the end result of that shadow government being allied with and driven by the uber elite, those people that actually pull the strings that make the Queen dance. There's like 4 or 5 individuals, or actually a council of 13 they call themselves, that goes to a group of 300 families that say that they own the planet. And, unfortunately for them, they'll mostly die over the course of these next 10 years. Probably not due to starvation and probably due to very violent means, but it'll be their, karmic just dessert, so to speak.
Well, certainly enough of us know about them.
Yeah.
And if Benjamin Fulford is correct, every one of them has 10 assassins, attached to them.
Yeah, I don't put much credence into Fulford or Burish or Deagle or some of these guys out there with their well-constructed but mainly grade B-sounding movie script kind of stuff. Reality is very complex.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've actually talked to some of these guys that are in the deep, dark secrets, and I've had people mail me strange and interesting photos. And reality is just too complex for it to work quite that way, that there's 10 assassins shadowing all of these people. True, we know who they are, and we've got lists of them, and they're really afraid of those lists coming out. And actually, I think they would care less about professional assassins being held at bay rather than the random, guy going amok because he can't feed his kids and deciding he's going to take it out on the local Rothschild or Rockefeller,
Yes. Well, I'm absolutely certain that some of the people are thinking that way.
I'm sure they are, yeah. And I think this is wrong. I actually think that these people can be redeemed through re-education
Oh, can we put them in re-education camps?
Yeah, exactly. That's what we need to do. And in fact, in our data, we've seen re-education camps for some time. And they're not like the re-education camps that one might presume being run by FEMA. These are part of the revolutionary side of things that gets kicked off in this coming July. The re-education camps don't show up until early 2011, but their point is to do just that, to rehabilitate, re-educate people that have been in the shadow world too long and bring them back in to get them righteous and clean, so to speak.
So you are really serious about that. I was just making a joke, thinking that we could send all of these people to the re-education camps like the North Vietnamese sent the South Vietnamese. And, they starve them and they overwork them and they, deprive them of sleep. And
Sure. But that was a model that, was built by the Soviets, but we've had re-education camps that existed all along. There were re-education camps that were run by the Vatican, and they attempted to re-educate Jewish people into becoming good Christians, and in the process tortured them to death until they gave up all of their money and their loot, and then they would allow their families to live and be Christianized, and that's how Nostradamus became a Christian from his Jewish heritage, was during the pressures of the Inquisition. So the North Koreans or the Vietnamese or the North Koreans or any of these fellows are just proceeding from a tradition that goes all the way back to the royals, where it's like, I'm going to re-educate you to be my serf one way or another, usually through, pressures of near death. But what we're talking about here is much more on the order of the re-education camp concept that you might see in some science fiction literature. That actually, during the revolution here, hopefully it won't be as violent as some of our data suggests, but part of it actually is that all of these individuals that have been working for the U.S. military, even, with a small view of the world relative to a nation-state that has been primarily taken over and run by a political elite that we don't elect, are going to be re-educated in the sense that they're going to be able to be provided with all of the data that shows exactly where their position was relative to this giant multi-headed hydra that was running things and the new current world view. Bear in mind that part of the transformation metadata layer this year, and starting in 2009, and we just crossed the threshold here, I think, on July 14th, that goes from July 14th of this year to July 7th of next year, is this part of the transformation that goes to the idea that the activities that we're seeing now will lead to a revolution, but it's not necessarily a revolution in the sense of people running around trying to establish a new political order. That this revolution will encompass within it a paradigm shift, again, relative to contact with greater entities, and so, or entities outside the U.S., or outside of Earth. And so what we end up with is a shift in view where all of our social structures have to be re-educated. We've got to re-educate ourselves and do away with our press and the propaganda, and that starts next year. And we'll start seeing more stuff available to us as we go forward that shows humans and what we will be and what we potentially can be out and about in the universe. And this means shedding such things as the hierarchical model of control. That, the president's in charge. Well, we know he's not. He's 28th down on his security clearance. And so, the people that are in charge are those 27 layers above him. And we know that the Federal Reserve stooges, Greenspan, and so on, are not really in charge. They're just being told what to do by the people that pull the strings. And this whole larger picture needs to come on out so that people can settle their minds around it. And this will be the kind of the subjects that's within the re-education camps. I'm not talking about starvation and torture and all of that. We're going to have enough of that, enough death to sicken everybody as we go through these next few years. And
well,
actually,
not only do we have the elite that literally need to be re-educated, we've got an entire youth.
Correct.
That has been educated on buy. And if I don't have the latest iPhone and the latest shoes and the latest clothes, I don't have any self-esteem whatsoever.
Right.
And then we've got all of these wannabe communists who think that communism, is wonderful. What they don't know is it's never been practiced upon the planet. What has been practiced is totalitarian dictatorships.
Correct. But capitalism is dying. Predatory capitalism as we have now is dying.
Well,
the US
capitalism
is not a constitutional republic anymore. It's run by a handful of hereditary political elite. And all of this changes as a result of, or process that brings about that same contact meme. Bear in mind that that shatters all kinds of paradigms for us when we think of the idea of aliens trucking around, or extraterrestrial humans. So we get such a shock that we are able to open ourselves up and look at our past history.
So in other words, aliens shocked us into reality.
Or reality shocked us into seeing the aliens, whichever way you want to look at it. But yeah.
Cliff, hold on a moment. We've got to take another break. We're talking with Clif High from Half Past Human, and we are talking about the things that are coming up in the future. We haven't even gotten to meme, whatever you mean by meme, and earthquakes. We'll be right back here on Radio RMN, brought to you by the Micro Effect Radio Broadcast Network. This is Raylan Allen, and you're listening to Radio RMN, and we're talking with Clif High, and we are talking about some of the things that are coming up in our future. We've talked about the swine flu. We've talked about the economic problems. We've talked about the ruling elite maybe all going into re-education camps along with our youth and the so-called communists. You know, Cliff, I can just see that everything comes to an absolute stop. Nobody is working. Everything is shut down, and we are all told to stay in our home and watch our televisions. That would be the easiest re-education.
That would be the nice way, yes. I was just going to say, ooh, how nice that would be, to go and sit down in the TV and have everybody in the planet that accepts TV as the ultimate arbiter of truth.
Right.
Get it from the TV is the horse's mouth kind of a deal, and say that, yes, this is indeed the case. It probably won't come out that way.
Well, I'm remembering John Galt and Ayn Rand when he hijacked all the radio and television networks worldwide and gave this 90-page speech.
We may have something similar to that. Okay, now, in an interesting aside, usually when we drill down into the detail of the data, we have a tendency to lose confidence the further we go on down, because there's potentially hundreds of thousands of detailed words that could actually be described, some of which could be describing a particular set of events. But we do have this thread that's been going to the idea that the power elite would lose control, and that they would lose control of one of their major arms of control over the populace here in the beginning part of this transformational process. Now, 2009 is the year of transformation, but the transformational process for us as a species does not stop at the boundaries of 2009, continues on. And we really started ramping up as of July 14th here. Now, our data would seem to suggest that sometime before July of next year, one of the three arms of control is lost, and that would be one of their arms of control. That would either be the press, the military, or the political, or the economic. We'll leave religion aside for a moment. But, and we'd always thought around here that, it was going to be the press, and then as events keep going on, it seems that economic is certainly going to crash, but that doesn't necessarily remove the powers that be as a source of control for them. And it even may make things easier with so many people being poor. However, we keep coming back to these strange little bits of data that pop up occasionally that suggest that they're going to lose absolute control over the press. And then if you go on down into the data there and drill down into the details, because you're a curious human and you see this thing and how could that possibly be? How would that work out? You see things in there where, for instance, the press will be vilified and even beat up by people in restaurants and stuff, and people will, spit on them and throw garbage on the press trucks because they just won't like the press very much.
Right.
And I always assumed that was the detail level showing how they would lose control, that it would be a generalized upwelling against the press. And what if we're wrong? There seems to be some suggestion that maybe, as you say, there will be like a hijacked attempt, and it may not even be that it comes from humanity per se or terrestrial humanity, and that the powers that be may find themselves here sometime over the next year dealing with the issue that for some period of time the ability to do planet-wide broadcasts is not under their control anymore. And we do have some data to support that. It doesn't necessarily say it's going to be space aliens, but it doesn't rule it out because of the place that we're getting that data.